All right. Good afternoon, guys. Welcome back to another Solar Surge live sales training. Folks, we are streaming out live to Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And of course, we are here every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for 1 hour live to deliver maximum value on the solar sales training. Now, in this week's episode, we have a special guest trainer. Michelle Spina is the National Training Manager at SolarEdge, and she's going to be teaching us all about the SolarEdge platform and the different technologies and components and products that make up the SolarEdge platform in 2023. You may recognize Michelle from a couple of the past videos we did at SolarCon. And of course, Michelle, we just had a chance to reconnect again briefly at RE Plus out in Las Vegas. So welcome back to the Solar Surge channel, and thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Yeah, I'm excited to be a part of the small solar world that we're all in. We always run into each other.
Yeah, it's neat because there are so many people in solar. I mean, especially you go to the conferences and you see these tens of thousands of people, but there does seem to be sort of this smaller group of us solar lifers who have really been doing this for a long time. So always nice to reconnect with you. What were your thoughts coming back from RE Plus? What were your impressions from the conference?
Gosh, I mean, huge conference for one. I think they said there was 41,000 people there this year. So really big. I thought that the push towards ecosystems was very strong. And, you know, it's not just solar anymore. It's a lot of other products. So it seems that that trend has definitely been moving that way.
Absolutely. In fact, I kind of sound like a broken record, or I felt like a broken record because I kept saying that, you know, that was my observation as well, is that everything is moving to one ecosystem. You know, choose your ecosystem or choose your platform. Today I titled it, you know, the SolarEdge platform. But it's like once you're in that ecosystem or that platform, then that platform is providing for a number of your different energy related needs, whether it's solar, batteries, EV charger, load control, monitoring. I mean, you name it. It's kind of like an operating system for your home's energy system, and then you just plug in the various accessories that you need. So, yeah. So, you know, on that note, let's go ahead and dive into SolarEdge. So, the SolarEdge platform. This is a platform. I mean, I believe you guys are the #1 market leading in terms of market share for U.S. residential inverter system. And it's a system that I've installed hundreds of times in the past when I was back in the installation business. I think Dan even has a SolarEdge system at his house. But it's a lot more today than what it was, let's say, 5 or 6 years ago. Is that right? Can you kind of show us how did we go from where we were 5, 6 years ago to where we are with the SolarEdge platform today?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that one of the things that we want to really make sure that salespeople know is that SolarEdge is the #1 inverter company globally. So we're really big. We're in 133 countries, known for our optimizers and our inverters and our innovation. So as you mentioned, you know, we started with optimizers, inverters, and now we have moved into a lot of other segments, EV charging, batteries, load management devices, all on one platform. We also are in large scale utility, virtual power plants. All of those types of things are part of our portfolio as well. But I think if you remember anything today as a sales rep, just know that SolarEdge is an optimized inverter solution. So when we talk about the different inverter topologies, string inverters, microinverters, and optimized inverter solution, we kind of get the best of both technologies. You know, just like Joe said, we're all moving towards a platform. It's really about what platform you select. And when you're talking about SolarEdge, we're a DC coupled solution. So I would love to dig into that and get a little bit more nerdy on that side of things as we go. But just know that in every situation with SolarEdge, you're going to have an inverter on the wall and optimizers on the roof. And we do that architecture on purpose because we want to harvest more energy from the roof as much as possible and convert it at one central location. And then we have optimizers on the roof that are allowing each module to work independently. They're tracking each module on a per module basis, but we're not converting up there. So it's allowing us to lose less energy on the roof. Is really what happens up on the roof with those optimizers. They're called module level power electronics. They allow each module to work independently. So I just wanted to show one more piece when it comes to that topology. It's important, at least to me as a salesperson. I've been in solar for 13 years, started on the sales side. Knowing what you sell is really important. And so this is just another view of string inverter, microinverter, and optimized solution, what's actually happening on the roof. So if you have a string inverter, one module is down, the rest of those modules are going to be working at the lowest performing module. So in a shading solution, string inverters is a challenge. Good news with microinverters, it allows each module to work independently. But because you're converting up there, you're actually losing energy every time you convert. It's called clipping, and you clip at a module level. And then the DC optimized with SolarEdge, remember, we're not converting up there. So if there's one module shaded, that's really the only module that's impacted. But our optimizers can also shift voltage. Because they're on that string, they have that flexibility to shift the voltage and make up for underperformance. So if you look at that module in the middle that's shaded, those neighboring optimizers can say, hey, we need to work overtime because that guy is not performing at optimal levels. So let's work overtime, and they will actually make up for some of that underperformance. So in a just apples to apples comparison, when it comes to inverter topology, with SolarEdge, you're getting about 10% more power from added production just by having a more efficient solution in terms of the topology that you're working with. But Joe, your question really was ecosystem and platform. And so I did want to show the solar.
It's okay, Michelle, because for those that don't know the history on all this, you're right. Let's start there, because when SolarEdge came on the scene, and I can remember back in 2014, you guys kind of came on the scene and just took over immediately. It became sort of like the number one platform, and we adopted it as our standard like the very next year. But that was the main innovation, was that in the past, if you wanted shade mitigation or module level tracking, you had to use microinverters. Microinverters were more expensive, more time to install, a little bit more complex. You touched on the clipping issue as well. But then, you all came to the scene with a solution that, as an installer, and I was an installer at the time, my impression was, hey, I can install this as fast as the old string inverters, or pretty close to as fast as the old string inverters, but still get the performance benefit of the microinverters, i.e. you don't have to deal with the problem of the string is only as strong as its weakest link. So that's what SolarEdge, I think, was initially known for, the optimized inverter solution. But now what has it grown to?
Yeah, so it has grown to a fully flexible ecosystem of products. We call it SolarEdge Home. So all of our products within this ecosystem all are called SolarEdge Home Battery, SolarEdge Home EV Charger. And these are the two prominent ones right now that we have available and ready to sell. So the battery is a 10 kilowatt hour battery. You can stack up to 3 per inverter, 9 per household, 9 per backup interface. And so that gives us the flexibility to, have a smaller solution, an essential loads backup, or a full home backup solution. That EV charger, and we talked a little bit before we started on how to sell EV chargers and batteries. And I kind of think of the EV charger as the gateway to upselling, because EV chargers are very easy to upsell in a solar solution. And why that is because EV chargers, it really is the best time to install an EV charger when you're already getting solar, for a couple of reasons. Number one, you can size the solar system to account for the EV charging. You usually need about 2 to 3 kW more to charge your car. So you can have that into the conversation when you're talking about EV charger plus solar. But also, if that homeowner is installing that EV charger alongside solar, you can wrap that into the ITC as the entire project. So that EV charger really becomes a very inexpensive add-on for homeowners, but a huge differentiator for salespeople in the house when they're coming up against competitive selling. So one of the big advantages on that EV charger as well is it's wired into the inverter. One of the things that I have noticed that sales reps don't really realize when they're selling EV chargers a lot of the time is you have to wire those typically into a main service panel, or you're getting a 240-volt outlet that you're plugging into. And that causes additional electrical work that is additional cost for homeowners. In this case, you're actually wiring this EV charger directly into the inverter. So this is allowing to save breaker space. You're sharing breaker space with that solar backfeed, and it's allowing you to not, have that additional electrical work.
Yeah, and that can be a big thing, especially in places like California, where you've got working with smaller electrical panels and just smaller physical space to be mounting all these different boxes and switches on the walls. That can be a big thing. Also, for those of you solar surge sales professionals, the more that you can explain this to a homeowner, how these different components actually connect in and integrate in with the home's electrical system, it's just going to impress upon the homeowner that you really understand what you're talking about. It's going to set you apart. In their mind, it's going to set you apart from the competition of folks that are just selling or just giving them quotes. You're actually explaining to them how this is going to work for them, educating them how it's going to work, and that's going to put you in a very strong position when it's time to close the deal.
Yeah, I kind of call it becoming a smart energy expert instead of a solar only sales consultant. I think that salespeople already ask questions that coincide with a lot of these things. So when you're going in and you're doing the needs analysis, a lot of times you're asking, is your energy appetite going to change, right? Is your electricity going to go up? A lot of times somebody will say, well, I'm going to get an EV, right? And in that case, maybe we're putting more solar on that house. But now, because you're a smart energy expert, you can also think, okay, maybe I'll bring up the EV charger. When you're talking to homeowners in needs analysis, normally, even in solar, a lot of times they bring up backup solutions. Oh, well, I'm going to have power in an outage, right? If I go solar. How many of us, and I hope that this group is thinking about this, how many of us has had to explain to a homeowner, well, if you go solar, you don't get backup power in an outage unless you have a battery, right? A lot of people have a misconception that you are going to have power in an outage if you go solar. So my challenge is, why don't we just sell them that solution? Because that's the misconception they had in the beginning. We do have that offer. We have it with a battery solution. So you have the ability to think long term for this homeowner. What's their energy needs going to be long term? And how are you going to be able to, as a smart energy expert, come to that solution instead of just talking about solar? Because really, the conversation isn't savings anymore. I mean, are you seeing that, Joe? It's like every state, especially now California, it's not really about savings as much as it's about control, independence, and being able to manage your energy.
I would agree with you 100% on that. And I'm glad that you touched on needs analysis, because this is something that we preach all the time here. And by the way, folks, if you haven't already got it, go ahead and grab the free download, the 3-step virtual sales process, because step 1 is all about needs analysis and how to properly interview your prospect first before you try to pitch or sell anything. You have to understand where they're coming from, what their needs are, what their pain points are. And also need to understand, what are their needs today? What do they need the solar system to do for them today? But where might they go in the future? Because maybe they don't have an electric vehicle today, but they certainly plan on replacing, their vehicle with an electric vehicle when their current one fails. And so they want to make sure that maybe bidirectional EV charging or other capabilities like that are being thought about now. So again, they're choosing the right platform that's going to allow them to expand when and where they need to. So I think that's 100%. The other thing that we talk about in the interview process is just asking them what their goals are. Is it mainly for electric bill savings, which we can still get great savings in certain markets that have NEM1 or NEM2. But for a lot of people, it's more emergency backup. And that's why we have a whole separate line of questioning for customers whose primary concern is emergency backup and energy independence. Because you're right, Michelle, it's not about the numbers on the spreadsheet. It's about getting them to this end state that they already have in their mind of them being energy independent. It has nothing to do with the savings. It has to do with self-actualization. And if you can be the person to help get them there, then you have a good chance of winning the sale.
Yeah.
So yeah, really
Yeah.
really like how you explain that.
Well, I think when I was a salesperson, I was one of those ones that, I mean, it was a long time ago now, but I was notorious for selling against batteries. And it was really because I was selling with my own wallet. You know, it was like, well, I can't afford a battery. So of course these homeowners can't afford batteries. But when I stopped doing that, it made me realize that other people's motivations aren't the same as mine. And also that homeowner pride is very powerful, and home renovations is really important to people. And so um, I always now, offer the best solution for that homeowner based on needs analysis. If they tell me that they had a outage last year that lasted, 8 hours, and that they're getting an EV probably in the next 2 years, the best solution I'm going to offer them first is unapologetically offering them like a 1 to 2 battery system with an EV charger and solar, because that's what they told me in needs analysis based on what they answered the questions. If that's too expensive at this time for the homeowner, then you can pare it down to, one that is comfortable, what they're comfortable with today. And you can use that as an opportunity to go back to that homeowner later to sell them these other things. I think that's now this whole platform experience where you can hold on to your customers for longer, because you can go back at Christmas time and say, hey, Mr. Customer, you didn't go EV charger during the solar sale, but I do remember you were going to get one in 6 months. Is it time to get that EV charger now? And so I think that it allows you to hold on to customers for longer.
Certainly. Well, I didn't want to take you off topic there, Michelle. Did you want to go? Did you want to go back? Well, actually, hold on. Before we have that, I see that we do have a question that came in. So before you switch back, let me put this up on the screen.
Yeah.
So, you ship Boo is asking, please discuss that you can only run 32 amps through the inverter and not 40 amps. And I believe this is for the EV charger he's talking about.
Yeah.
Do you mind jumping on that one?
Let's do it. So let's talk about the EV charger that we have currently. So that is a level 2 charger. It does run on 32 amps through the inverter, through the grid. But we do have something called solar boost mode, where if you're actually charging from grid power plus solar, if there's excess PV coming from the roof, then you can actually charge from solar and grid, and that will go up to a full 40 amps, even through the inverter. So the standard's going to be 32 if you're only pulling from the grid.
Makes sense.
All right, let's get back to here. So I do want to point out, I saw another question come in here. DC would be nice on a EV charger. I totally agree with you. And we're really excited. I know Joe saw it at RE Plus that we are coming out with a DC direct bidirectional EV charger. So that should be out in probably mid next year, if we're being realistic. I think that this whole team knows that bidirectional charging is a bit of a challenge right now, because we're waiting for the car manufacturers to allow for bidirectional EV charging in a more robust way. There's only really a couple of cars that can do it. But luckily we have this DC EV charger that's bidirectional that's coming out. And love to see that that somebody recognizes that DC is really important, because what that means is you can just throw that solar, unfiltered, organic energy from the sun straight to your car, which I think we've all wanted to do. So,
Michelle, for those,
yeah.
Sorry to cut you off here, but for those that aren't as familiar with this topic, I know DC coupling and the advantages of the DC coupled architecture are something that of course you and your team do an excellent job of articulating. But maybe for those that aren't as familiar with the issue, can you explain what are the benefits of a DC coupled solar system, i.e. your architecture, as opposed to a microinverter architecture, when it comes to things like EV charging or battery storage?
Yeah. So I want to show a couple of visuals. I'm a visual person when it comes to this topic. So I like to say we want to keep it in DC because, as we know, solar is DC power, right? But we need AC for the home to actually power our appliances and things. But here's the good news: batteries are also DC. And now this EV charger that we're talking about can also be DC. The car battery is DC. So we want to keep things in DC for as long as possible because it allows us to use that energy before we convert it. So if you look here on this this graphic, SolarEdge has all of our products on the DC side. Remember, we have one inverter that's on the wall that allows us to convert everything at one central location. So we have the solar and we have the battery on the DC side, and then we use that inverter to filter, essentially process the energy into AC that we can use only one time. So we have one conversion of energy in our solution. When you're talking about an AC coupled solution, which is, there are a lot of AC coupled solutions on the market right now, and microinverters being the biggest one, you actually have to convert the energy 3 different times before it's used in the house because, of course, solar is DC. We're converting it on the roof once through microinverters. Then it's being reconverted to DC so that we can charge the battery. And then it's being reconverted into AC so it can be used in the house. So this is including about 6 extra inverters inside of the battery. So what SolarEdge likes to do is have one brain of the system, one inverter. In a microinverter solution, you have 30 to 40 inverters because you have them all on the roof, you have them in the battery, and those are all really critical points. Those are all brains of the system that you have to make sure are working properly. We want to have one brain and one point of conversion. And when it comes to converting 3 different times, you're actually losing energy every single time you convert in an AC coupled solution. And so we call it the triple conversion penalty because we like to be dramatic, but it really equates to about 10% more power. Just same size system, same size battery, about 10% more power because we only convert one time. I want to show just one more thing that shows this benefit. And this is helpful in understanding the wiring here. So when you have a DC coupled solution, you're wiring the solar, the battery, and the EV charger into the inverter. So we're sharing a breaker with that inverter, and that's what's going into the main service panel. When you have an AC coupled solution, each of these things take up separate space. And so they're somewhat working independently from one another. And so they are wired separately, taking up more space. A lot of times this is when you see more main panel upgrades. And so this is really the advantage of a DC coupled solution. It allows us to wire really everything into that inverter and keep things on the DC side. One last point here. If solar and the battery are on the DC side, what does that mean? It means we can actually charge the battery directly with DC power as well. So if there is any energy that would normally be clipped or lost from the roof, we can actually charge the battery with it. So we are losing even less energy than we normally would in a clipping situation at all, if there were any clipping within our solution, because we're sending that to the battery and charging it with that. So those are really the advantages of a DC couple solution.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm looking at these questions, and this is a group that has awesome questions. So I'm excited to answer them.
Yeah, the solar search community is probably going to be challenging in terms of technical questions, just because they tend to be very well educated and they really get into the details on this with a lot of the content that we're putting out. I know another issue that I've seen with systems that I've installed is that having a DC coupled battery allows for precise throttle control of the solar only allowing through how much the battery can take, as opposed to AC coupled battery backups. A lot of times if there's too much solar coming in and there's no way to throttle the solar, they have to just shut it all down. Yep. And so you end up microcycling the battery a lot more. Is that an issue that you've seen, and what are your thoughts on that?
No, that is definitely advantage of a DC coupled solution. So, you know, we can actually concurrently power the house and charge the battery at the same time. We also have a situation where a lot of people don't realize AC coupled solutions many times will not have dark start. So if you deplete the battery to 100%, that solar will not kick back on until the grid is turned back on. In our situation, we have dark start solutions. So it allows us to, even if that battery is 100% depleted, once that sun comes back up the next day, the solar will start up again, charge the battery, power the house. Kind of as I mentioned, each of these things are working together as opposed to separately. So it allows you to have a more streamlined solution. And like you said, less microcycling and the ability to leverage solar plus the battery at the same time.
Makes sense. Yep. Yep. Looks like Yushipbu has another question here if we've got a moment, asking, are you doing any more SolarEdge Edgeonomics 101? Can you do one on the energy bank profiles?
That's a really good question. So I used to do this character in the videos where I had a little red scarf, and they made me kind of like the Flow of SolarEdge. They kind of wanted me to be like Flow from Progressive.
Right.
And I'm not doing that character anymore, but I am doing videos. So that's a really good recommendation for a topic. And I will definitely put that into the bank. So thank you for that one. Can I answer the one here with the bidirectional charger?
Absolutely. Yep. Let's go for it.
All right. So this is a great question, Jeff. So with bidirectional charging in the future, it seems like this is going to drive down the demand for an expensive battery in the market today. Joe, I'd love to hear your perspective on this too, but here's my thought is I see that the battery solution as the automatic power to the house. You know, it's like if there is a power outage, that's going to automatically turn on and allow that homeowner to power their home. The bidirectional EV charger, while it's an amazing solution, I see that as kind of taking the place of what a generator would in terms of a plan B solution, where if that homeowner had a solar battery, that's going to take up plan A and that's going to automatically power their home. And then the EV charger or the EV will then take up the slack if there needed to be any more power to the house as a supplement. Reason I say that is because you have to rely on the kind of the best case scenario in worst case scenario circumstances where that car has to be in the garage. It has to be plugged in. It has to be fully charged. It has to be ready to go for a backup scenario and a blackout. And a lot of times homeowners don't have that best case scenario set up in their home. And so I see it as being a supplement, and the solar battery themselves as being the plan A, still the automatic solution.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts on it are, particularly for markets like California, where the battery storage is going to be used actively for buying and selling on a daily basis. I think having at least some home battery storage is going to be practical. It's not cheap. None of this is cheap, but I think you know, practically you're going to want to have a dedicated home storage for that use case. Now, for somebody that's in an NEM1 market where the battery is purely for backup purposes and they don't necessarily feel that they can afford to spend the extra $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 for a real true home battery backup, then I do like the idea of having that option of using the electric vehicle as a storage battery to allow you to run at least some capacity of your home in a blackout. So I think that's going to help folks that are in NEM1 markets and using batteries for emergencies only. But for daily use batteries, Michelle, I think you're right. I think you have some home battery storage, and then the vehicle battery is just an extra supplement to that.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more states really thinking about this NEM3 as a good solution, and thinking about utility policy and adjustments. You know, in California right now, if you go with the battery, it's more cost effective in terms of return on investment than if you went without one. And we're seeing other states kind of going that route too. The ones that don't have 1-for-1 net metering, it could be beneficial enough for a homeowner to go with a battery in those states. And then they also have the ability to use it for backup as they need. So I think we're still going to see solar batteries as something that's going to be around for a very long time.
Yep. Yeah, we're seeing this trend in Texas now too. In sort of the post net metering world, we're seeing a lot of the Texas utilities are no longer offering the 1-for-1 buybacks, and now we're also seeing a number of new leasing options that are storage friendly. And I think that's another thing that if you're just looking at the pure economics of it on a cash flow basis, there are ways that you can be immediately cash flow positive with leased solar, even including some storage. In fact, the one product we have in Texas uses your battery specifically because it keeps the cost low enough that the economics of the lease still work out, and helps give some protection against losing the net metering.
Yeah. Well, I think we've been seeing leases come out much more popular lately too because of the interest rates, but also because I think one of the things we hear a lot is the warranty on batteries, and leases and PPAs. They have a 25 or 20-year agreement most of the time, and that factors in the replacement of a battery most of the time. So homeowners feel a little more at ease with that type of solution. So we're seeing them a lot more.
Very cool. All right, well, let's get back to the presentation. So where would you like to go next in terms of
I wanted to mention, I've heard you say this quite a bit before too, about the importance of an ecosystem. And I like how you say, you pick one and you end up kind of being set with that one ecosystem solution. I agree. That's why we have all of these pieces that we want to make available to homeowners. But I didn't mention the smart energy management devices, the load controllers, the relays. Those are really live right now. They're on the price lists. They're available. Those relays and switches allow homeowners to manage those heavier loads automatically through an app. So through my SolarEdge, but also for an installer, it allows you to install a relay on those heavy loads. And in an outage scenario, it will just turn those things off automatically. Instead of having to do like a critical loads panel, that type of thing, you'll instead just do these relays on the heavy loads, shut those off, and then give the homeowner the flexibility to turn on the lighter loads during an outage. They have the ability to turn them on and off on their app as well. So if they did want to turn them on, they could. But this is just another piece within this ecosystem. And, as we're talking about the importance of an ecosystem, I think that NEM 3 is a great example, because in that market, you have to have a whole solution that communicates with each other on a dime. Like every component has to talk to each other to make it advantageous for your homeowner to actually yield the best return on investment, take advantage of the high export rates, those types of things. And so every single piece component within our solution, the inverter, the battery, the EV charger, they all work on a mesh network, and they talk to each other to say, hey, it's advantageous for this homeowner right now to export the battery as opposed to use it directly into the house. We're going to throw that battery completely into the grid so that they make the most money, or we're going to send it to the home so that they can consume it. So we're making those decisions on the back end. If your homeowner has a profile like NEM 3, PG&E, we know exactly what that export rate schedule is, and we can export at times that are advantageous for the homeowner. That homeowner can also schedule EV charging at times that are advantageous for them. And so there is a real important reason why sticking with an ecosystem is going to be even more essential getting into these markets that are going towards a NEM 3 type environment. So speaking of profiles, somebody else brought up profiles a bit ago. I just did want to show that we have multiple profiles. That one that I mentioned, that NEM 3, where we can discharge the battery, we can send it back to the grid, we can export at advantageous times. And then we could also maximize self-consumption whenever possible. And then, of course, we have backup only profile that allows homeowners just to keep their battery stored until there's a emergency situation.
Yeah, and the nice thing about this is, like you said, Michelle, once you program the rate schedule into the software then can do all the buying and selling for the homeowner, right? To maximize profitability.
Yes, yes, exactly. I mean, you know what's interesting about SolarEdge is we've already had to deal with this type of scenario in other countries. So Austria has this scenario. This sounds crazy, but every single hour of every single day, they have a different rate of electricity, and tomorrow it could be different. So they actually have a rolling on demand electricity rate schedule, and we have had to overcome that on our back end with this type of automatic management of our ecosystem already in that area. And so when NEM 3 came in, we already had an infrastructure that was set up for this type of approach. So it wasn't that hard for us to implement it because we had already had to deal with it in other countries.
That's great. Yeah, and I think sometimes we lose that perspective here in the US market because we're like, oh, net metering's over, the good old days are over. Now we have to learn how to do batteries. But the reality is in Europe, batteries are a mainstream component of solar in Europe. Isn't that correct?
Yes, I'm on with Europe a lot. They kind of laugh at us about complaining about NEM 3 because they don't do any systems anymore without batteries. It's not really worth it for them. So they have batteries on all of their systems, kind of similar to Hawaii, where they need batteries on all of their systems. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really the global path to batteries. And we just got hit with it, a couple of countries later, so we definitely are maybe the third when it comes to this NEM 3 type of environment.
Yeah, I mean, and the reality is, compared to other parts of the world, we've had such cheap retail electric rates compared to Europe, compared to Hawaii, the Caribbean. So we've just been kind of spoiled for so long, and now that we're kind of dealing with what the rest of the world's been dealing with, now we have an economic case to essentially being our own power plant. And philosophically, this is something I believe in anyway, right? Is be your own power plant, use the grid as the electric provider of last resort.
Hmm.
Run off solar during the day, self-consume your solar at night from your battery. If your battery, for whatever reason, does not have enough charge to get you through the night, then pull the deficit from the electric company. You're going to pay for it, but it's there if you need it. You're not going to be left in the dark. But I think that's kind of the way things are going. And for
Yeah.
me, again, philosophically, I'm here promoting, hey, energy independence. There's technology here that allows you to become energy independent, put you back in control of your energy situation. And this is what it looks like to get there.
Definitely. And we're even seeing, some states in the United States will see what happens in California and will decide, well, I want energy independence, just kind of like how we saw the Texas freeze. After the Texas freeze, all of those neighboring states were like, oh no, I need backup power. And this is now kind of happening in California where people are seeing what happened here. And all of these neighboring states are thinking, what if this happens to us? So one of our biggest states for batteries is Utah. And Utah doesn't have grid instability. They also don't have this net metering policy that we have in California, but people are still really interested in batteries because they want the peace of mind. And like you said, they want to be their own power plant. They want to be somewhat immune to these changes if they do come. So we're seeing a lot of other states come into this just because they're seeing what's happening. They're seeing the writing on the wall. So as a sales rep, I've been telling people like in Texas and Florida, I know that you've been not selling batteries that much right now. You've been avoiding it, but right now is the time to really get used to selling them because it is going to come where we all kind of need to know how to sell batteries.
We do. Looks like we have another question here from UShip. Let me put this up on the screen. Tough question here. I know SolarEdge is testing end users for changing battery profiles outside the US. When are you thinking it will come to the US? It would be helpful for time of use in California. Any thoughts on that, Michelle?
Yeah, so we're actually testing it in the US too. We have the capability to have homeowners change their battery profiles. Right now, currently, they have the ability to change their backup reserve levels already, but it's going to be coming very soon where end users can change their battery profiles in the United States through My Solar Edge. We are testing it. I would say it's about 50-50 that the installer themselves wants us to give homeowners that capability, just because if that homeowner doesn't set it properly, it could come back to that installer with a challenge, you know? So I think that we want to balance that fine line of like what's too much management for a homeowner to have and what's not enough. So that's kind of why we're testing it before we launch it.
Yeah, and that actually touches on a question that I wanted to ask you, Michelle, because you know, as somebody who was on the installation side of the business, I guess technically still am on paper, but realistically, most of what I do right now is marketing, sales, and education. But as somebody who was an active installer in the past, I know that one of the issues that the installers are dealing with is, first of all, which ecosystem to carry, because they're all competing, and there's a ton of new competitors that flooded into the space. You probably saw dozens of new battery companies
Yeah.
there at RE Plus. So I know the installers are being bombarded with all these new products. They got to figure out which one or which ones they're going to offer. But then also they need to get to a point where they can install solar with storage, potentially with EV charging, uh, as profitably as profitably and predictably as they can install solar only today. And I
Mhm.
know that's an issue for installers because I lived through that myself, being one of the guys that was, you know, sort of a tinkerer by nature, and experimented with a number of different battery systems, only to come back and find at the end of the day that many of these installations were unprofitable. So what are some things that you all are doing? What's your approach to make sure that your installers don't get burned in this whole evolution here, and that they can actually continue to run and maintain profitable businesses in this age of more complex solar plus storage plus EV plus load control, more complex integrations?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that we do run into that. Our team loves to be a consultant on the side of, you know, what do you need to charge in order to maintain profitability? We have some customers that come to us and say, I don't even know where to start with what I should be charging on this in terms of reaching our margins. On the technical side, with SolarEdge, we are committed to two things. Number one, having training that is really eliciting a goal of streamlining installation. So we have installation demo sites on at all of our distribution facilities. So our green techs, a lot of our green techs around the country, where installers can come and do hands-on training. That's one thing. We have certifications online if they want to do it online, and it's still kind of hands-on because they have to actually point towards things in terms of wiring and commissioning. And then we are constantly focusing on bringing our commissioning times down, because I think that that's one of the biggest pain points where our solution is we want you to get this installation done in a day. We don't want you to have to come back to the site. We want the battery and the solar and the EV charger to be able to be all installed same day, and commissioned same day. And that's our goal. And that's what we've gotten to realistically. Our commissioning time is down to about 20 to 25 minutes on batteries, which has been, a big step forward because commissioning takes a long time usually. So I think that those are all things that we're looking for, is how do we ensure that we can get the installer off the site as quickly as possible. But we also have SolarEdge Designer, which is a designer tool that's free within our system online that allows our installers to install accurate sites through our designer tool without having to pay anything. So they can use that for the interconnection and the inspection, and not have to go back and forth on change orders and things like that.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's incredibly important. Getting the crew offsite as efficiently as possible, and also minimizing callbacks. That's the other thing that kills you as an installer, is having to send the crew back out after the installation because there's some kind of a firmware update or some kind of a technical support issue that requires on-site maintenance.
Right. Yes. And all of our firmware updates are over the cloud. So for the most part now, if we have to do firmware updates at all, it's not needing to be on site.
Great. Well, it looks like we have about 15 minutes left for the live stream. By the way, thank you guys who are writing in with your questions. Really appreciate the engagement. I probably should have made an announcement at the beginning. So folks, if you're new to these Solar Surge live trainings, the reason we do them live is so that you have a chance to ask your questions and have your questions answered in real time from me or Michelle. So just be sure to just go ahead and post it in the chat feed, or post a comment if you're looking at LinkedIn or Facebook, and we'll do our best to get some answers to you right away. But as we are winding down on time here, Michelle, is there any other pieces that you'd like to talk about your ecosystem? We talked about optimization. We talked about DC coupling, kind of the advantages there. We talked about bidirectional EV charging. We talked about battery storage and different battery profiles, I think is where you left off. What else is there on the platform?
Yeah, and I can't stress enough the importance of a full ecosystem, and I will show it one more time on. I have another slide on this My SolarEdge app. So this is what your homeowners will see when they can manage their entire ecosystem. So one of the big questions I get from sales teams is why shouldn't I just pair a different battery with the SolarEdge system? Because of course you can, if you wanted to pair a different battery with a SolarEdge system, you could, but the challenge is they then won't talk to each other, right? They then are not going to communicate in an intelligent way to make intelligent decisions for your homeowners. And so that ecosystem is so important in order to really maximize the value for the homeowner, not to mention it's all going to be on the same app. So they have the ability to watch how much their solar is producing and where that energy is going. Are they sending it to the house, the grid, the battery, the car? They're going to see that in real time. There's a couple of things in terms of safety on that My SolarEdge app too for batteries that's really important. So in a blackout situation, the homeowner is going to get a pop-up that tells them they're backed up and will give them how much time approximately they have left on that battery so that they can conserve if they need to. And then we have something called Weather Guard. So it takes all of the weather satellites in the area and will predict severe weather coming and will charge the battery to full capacity before that storm gets there. This is also for things like high winds. So what's interesting is just yesterday I had an outage at my house because it was a high wind warning. That's always what starts wildfires here. And so that Weather Guard solution will pick up a high wind warning as well and will charge the battery for an outage scenario for your house also. So those are safety features that have been really important when it comes to backup scenarios for your homeowner. Just another reason why an ecosystem, is essential in this type of utility environment, because grid stability is even less common than it ever has been. And utility policy is requiring us to make these different decisions at different times of day. And each homeowner has a unique profile dependent on where their utility is. So it looks like we got a couple more questions coming in here. Let me see. Yeah, so this is a great reiteration. So SolarEdge batteries are DC coupled, and to reiterate, they are on-grid solutions. If you are in California, we do also have a self-consumption only battery option. So some of us have asked for that as well. So like if that homeowner doesn't have blackouts in their area, but they just want to use that battery for self-consumption purposes, because in NEM 3 we have to be able to become our own power plant, like Joe says, and this self-consumption battery, really seamless installation, very simple. It's essentially just hanging a heavy box on the wall. It's not setting that homeowner up for backup, which is the most expensive part of a battery installation usually, and the thing that takes the most time. And so if you are in California, and we are probably going to roll it out to some other markets because we're seeing it as an advantage for other, not one-to-one net metering markets. That is a solution that that we offer at SolarEdge too.
Yep, that's great. I know I had a chance to speak to Connor about that a little bit back at the conference. But Michelle, there's one question that comes to mind here when we're talking about SolarEdge with batteries, because I got to say the majority of SolarEdge systems I've done with batteries have not been with the SolarEdge battery. They've been with either the Tesla Powerwall or with the Franklin battery. But can you again explain a little bit more about what would the homeowner be missing if they went with an AC coupled battery that does not communicate to the SolarEdge platform, where it just sees it as solar, but it doesn't really know what's behind the inverter?
Right. Well, I mean, we talked about the triple conversion penalty, right? Which is that conversions, those 3 different conversions that need to happen to get into the house. That would be happening if you were pairing a Franklin or a Tesla battery with our solution. So number one, energy loss for that homeowner, less efficient for sure, but also the non-seamless interaction with, hey, I need to export at this particular amount of time or at this particular time to make it advantageous for me to make the most money from the utility, and having the inverter talk to the battery and having all of those things communicate, that wouldn't be happening. Having, I kind of call it Franken-solar, right? Like Frankenstein. We are all kind of used to that in this industry because we've had to deal with that. If we've been selling for a long time, there was always a panel manufacturer, an inverter manufacturer, a different battery manufacturer. We have a huge advantage now that now we have these platforms that talk to each other, that don't have to react to other people's technologies. So think about that. If you're pairing a Tesla Powerwall or your Franklin with a SolarEdge solution, we have to react to any changes that they make in their technology that we maybe weren't prepared for, and vice versa. If you have an entire ecosystem that talks to each other, all of those products are compatible. They're all talking to each other at all times. Just think about other things in our lives that we buy compatible products for. If you're an Apple fan, right? Like, has anybody tried to actually get photos off of an Android device onto a Mac?
Right, right.
Not going to happen, right? So that's kind of why we want to have that ecosystem that talks to each other, that allows that homeowner to have an energy ecosystem for life, that talks to each other.
Yeah, I think it really, it might seem like small, insignificant details on paper, but having a consistent user experience, just like the example you gave with Apple. When I started on YouTube, I was shooting on my iPhone, and it was so easy to just wirelessly beam the video file to my MacBook. I could then edit on my MacBook, and I could just, everything was just smooth. And I think that's what we're talking about for the homeowner experience with solar. Everything is just smooth. You have one app, the battery knows what the inverter is doing, the inverter knows what the load controller is doing. Everything is kind of talking together. And also I can tell you, from an installer support perspective, that's a big thing too, because as you I think you said, you don't have to keep up with their technology changes. Now, I can think way back to when I was first installing SolarEdge batteries. I actually misspoke. It wasn't Tesla Powerwall and Franklin. The most systems I've done was LG Chem battery. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you were around back then, but that initial rollout was very bumpy because there was always these incompatibilities between the firmware that the LG battery was running and the firmware that the SolarEdge inverter was running. And if those things got out of sync, then the system didn't work. And then as the installer, you're on the hook to go back out there and try to figure it out, or pull the battery off and try to return it, or try to upgrade it in the field. So that kind of stuff just kills you, both as an installer, kills your profitability, but also just from a homeowner experience perspective, that kind of stuff, kills you. One company's pointing at the other, they're blaming each other why the system's not working, and that's really not what you want. So if you can just choose one platform or one ecosystem that gives you everything you want, you've got one app, you've got one tech support person to call,
Yeah.
And I think it just makes for a much more smooth and seamless user experience.
Definitely. I mean, and on that installer side, you brought it up, one source of training, one source of technical support that also helps with those margins that you were talking about per project, because going to one solution is allowing that installer to know that there's supply, and allowing them to know that, those firmware upgrades are going to happen automatically, and that they have a support function that they only call one phone number for.
Yep. Well, Michelle, we got about 5 minutes left. Is there anything else that you'd like to cover here while we've got a little bit of time left here on the live training?
I mean, I think we covered everything in a full hour, like DC coupled, avoiding the triple conversion penalty, making sure that everything's talking to each other in an ecosystem, highest efficiency. It looks like a lot of these people on your board are really strongly understanding that we have a much higher efficiency when it comes to DC coupled. So I love to see that. And so, yeah, I think that we covered really everything, Joe. I mean, is there anything that you felt like we didn't address?
No, I think we touched on all of it. And folks, again, this is why we're here every week live Wednesday at 3 p.m. is to really just get you the most value possible. If you're in the solar sales profession, or if you're thinking about joining the solar sales industry or joining a solar sales team, we want to make sure that we're giving you as much value as we can up front, so that you're going to be in the best competitive situation. We always talk about bringing more professionalism to the solar sales process. And part of that is expert product knowledge, actually knowing how the product or the ecosystem that you're offering can meet your homeowner's needs, whether it's today or whatever their future plans might be for things like electric vehicles or backup power and so forth.
Yeah.
Again, if you haven't done so, oh, go ahead.
One more thing, I always forget to say it, but if you do want to hang out with us more at SolarEdge, we do have a SolarEdge Sales Elite program. It's just for salespeople. We have a lot of guest speakers involved with it. We're going to start doing some field trips to Israel if you're interested. We have our own swag and stuff. So if you just Google SolarEdge Sales Elite, you can sign up for that. We have a newsletter, different trainings just for salespeople. So would love to see you around more.
That's great. And Michelle, that actually it leads me to the next question. What's the best way for people to keep up with you? Are there any social media links that you can share, or what's the best place to go? And we'll make sure that we get a link in the description in the final version of the video.
Yeah, so we do have, I mean, if you actually just Google SolarEdge Sales Elite, like I said, you can sign up there. We also on Facebook have a SolarEdge Sales Elite Facebook group. Salespeople actually send me direct messages through there. When I hear that little Facebook ping, it tells me that there's a sales rep in trouble and needs an immediate answer, because a lot of times you're in the house with a homeowner. And so I watch that all day. So if you do want to be on, have me on call, have my team on call, the SolarEdge Sales Elite Facebook group is good for that. And then the distribution list, saleselite@solaredge.com, is an email address that my team prioritizes first and foremost. So if we see something come through that distribution list, we answer those questions first. So those are all great ways to get connected with us.
Excellent. Well, Michelle, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being generous with your time and sharing with the Solar Surge audience here. Of course, this is not just a live training. It's going to live on YouTube on the channel going forward. So for those of you that are interested, how to sell the SolarEdge platform, and particularly, not just selling the platform, but understanding what the capabilities are, matching those to your homeowner's needs, both today and where they might want to go in the future. Of course, we have the free download, as always, the Solar Surge virtual sales process. This is the same process that I use personally. There should be a link for a free PDF download in the description below if you haven't gotten that already. And of course, tune back in, because we'll be here every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern for the live training. Michelle, we've just got about 40 seconds left here. Is there anything else that the audience should know about you or the SolarEdge ecosystem, or what they might look for in the future?
I mean, I'm here to help salespeople. That's my whole goal. So if you have any questions and you want to connect, please reach out. Would love to see you on Sales Elite. Joe, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah, it's been great. And I know we've done a few other videos in the past, and really appreciate your willingness to share all of your expertise and experience. And I hope to do another one of these again with you in the future.
Yeah, when that bidirectional comes out for sure, right? We got to get on.
Yep. We got to get those RE Plus videos out too. A lot of exciting news.
Yep.
Well, folks, we are out of time for today's live stream. But as always, we are here Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, and we look forward to seeing you on the next training.